Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aaron. So I will be so-called a co-presenter with our guest speaker, Dr. Tim, is the founder of Evolution. So I believe that you have heard about the Evolution. Is one of the tool in EA tools in the Magic Quadrant, and I think we are privileged to have him to share about the insight and more information about Evolution EA tools from the source itself. Okay, so before that, let me just share with you on what our so-called value proposition in terms of who ATD is, and also what we believe in terms of implementing digital enterprise architecture in the context, of course, financial services as well as other industry. Okay, so let me just give you a brief overview about who we are. I think we were founded in the 2006, so I think we have grown. Spread across 5 countries in the Asia Pacific, and initially we started off offering a lot of training in the area of enterprise architecture and certification. Then after that we run event. Then of course eventually 8-9 years ago we started offering a consultancy. That's why I think the partnership with the Evolution, it will strengthen so-called our value proposition, not only for us as well as for our valued client. Okay. So these are some of the certification that we do offer from ISA, or the certification of business architect, information architect, software architect, infrastructure architect, as well as solution architect. And of course, from the open group, like TOGAF, Enterprise Architecture Framework, ArchiMate, as well as TOGAF Business Architecture. And ISACA, all the COVID Foundation, Implementer, and SSL level, as well as DevOps, and also ITIL 4.0 from Accelerators. Right, so these are some of the training path just for your reference, that we do offer all the comprehensive, just now I mentioned about the provider. So we offer all the training, competency development in terms of skill sets, as well as the knowledge, how to set up enterprise architecture to drive digital transformation successfully. So I will not be drilling into more detail on this, because you can visit our website. Okay. So in terms of our client portfolio, I think we are notable in terms of the achievement, because some of our clients are the Open Group President Awards winner in 2018 and 2019. Yeah? As well as some of our clients here as well listed here, their output in terms of the enterprise architecture, artifacts, and deliverable were reviewed by Gartner. So we are passed through quite a stringent requirement and the benchmark. As well as in the this year alone, actually just this month, Forrester awarded 2 of our clients is listed in the top 10 EA awards globally. So this one also another milestone and achievement of our capability in terms of establishing and delivering enterprise architecture services. So these are the rest of the clients that we have done across Asia Pacific countries. So this is the fact that many organizations today, if they don't have enterprise architecture, they come up with a very so-called, I would say, powerful as well as a practical strategy how to execute. Then after that, they will hand over to the digital transformation. This is, I think, the major problem. When the digital transformation team receive the instruction how to execute the project, they're becoming panicky, because they don't know how to run the digital transformation properly, because digital transformation project is not the same like the IT project or a system project in the past. It has increased in terms of the complexity and also the dependency. That's why I think if you do this, likelihood the digital transformation project, it will not be successful. So what happened is that the current best practice, based on what I think just now you mentioned, I mentioned about Gartner, Forrester research, that they believe that even those who are successful, they need to do an enterprise architecture development first. So basically from the strategy itself, so we are going to distill the strategy, we are going to analyze the strategy, we understand the impact, how the strategy impacting our internal organization, internal business, information, application, technology, as well as external entities that are impacted by the new so-called strategy that we are going to implement. Then once we understand digital enterprise architecture, then we can consolidate all the gaps, all the things that we need to do into the work packages, and they will be hand over into the digital transformation team. Yeah, so this is basically a preferred way rather than going straight from strategy to the transformation. So we go through the enterprise architecture way. So this is actually the model on how the strategy itself can impact the business and also the technology. So this is basically is the closed loop. So any changes in any of the layers, the other entities are impacted as well as the analysis are so-called notified. So this is basically is about the understand the whole enterprise dependency. So the on enterprise architecture, when we run the digital transformation, we need to know all the impact in a holistic way. And of course, this is where the model of the digitally connected enterprise came about. Basically, it's, but we need to know that any changes in the strategy, business, information, application, and the infrastructure are all well informed so that no surprises and we can execute transformation successfully. With that, what we are trying to achieve is that we are trying to align all the current program or project management office to be fully aligned with the architecture itself and also the service delivery. Because if we start doing enterprise architecture, what we end up in the next 3 to 5 years, we will have a lot of so-called digital island. Like now we call it a stoppipe system. So enterprise architecture is really trying to connect the entire enterprise into a single platform so that we can run transformation smoothly. And this is where the digital strategy came about. Basically, integration between business and IT strategy. Because today, I don't think any business strategy can live without the support of technology. That's why the convergence between business and IT strategy need to be taken place. Then from there, we analyze using the digital enterprise architecture to understand the business impact, information impact, application impact, and technology impact, so that we can manage the enterprise in a cohesive and integrated way. Then once we understand all the digital enterprise architecture gap, then like business gap, application gap, infrastructure gap, as well as the information gap, then we pass down into the digital transformation team to execute the project via project management office. So basically this is the model that so-called we believe in, and we are already help a lot of our client to establish this framework properly. So the model basically this is basically an analogy about multiple processes, people, knowledge, capability, and etc. So basically, is in the typical enterprise is very complex, and typically you don't have visibility about what other team are doing, what other division are doing, and what other people are doing. So if you don't have the visibility, or we don't have the visibility, it's very hard for us to do transformation. That's why the enterprise architecture concept of the digital map kicks in. So basically, we need to model between motivation and the strategy layer. Yeah, all these are using the ArchiMate notation. Then after that, can connect and we understand the impact to the business. What are the business entities are impacted? Then after that, we also know what are the application actually required to support the business, as well as technology layer. And of course, the information are also playing a critical role to connect all the data into the so-called turn it into the information so that we can make a strategic decision. And the last part is where all the project need to go through. So basically, we need to have some sort of traceability in the enterprise so that we understand the dependency and the impact analysis that one to another. Okay, so I think this is just a brief overview on the TOGAF. Yeah, so those of you who have not taken a TOGAF course, so basically TOGAF is basically if you see from the bubble A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, basically is a rotation. So it is what in the architecture they call it transition. So when you are in the transit, you have not reached your destination, and you will never reach your destination because the enterprise keep evolving, getting better, getting improving, the capability increase, and etc. So is where the rotation between the phases of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H continue. Yeah. So basically, if I can give you a summary in terms of the preliminary, basically this is where we need to get the management buy-in. We need to set up the so-called the governance. We need to understand the so-called the principle that we need to apply. And of course, preparing the entire organization like change management to go through the so-called transformation. And this is where we do development on the architecture. We call it architecture building block. So we understand the enterprise strategy. This is very important. Then from there, we understand the so-called the business, the impact. That's why we have the gap. The gap is the thing that we need to change. Then, of course, we continue with understanding the information gap and application gap. What are the things that we need to change or improve? And of course, the technology or infrastructure gap. And once this is done, we develop what they call it solution building block, where we consolidate all the gap and we turn it into a project. Then after that, of course, we are assigning the resources, creating the timeline. Then after that, we execute the project. So in the phase G, if the project 6 months, then the phase G will last 6 months. Then phase H is where there is any changes in terms of the business changes or technology changes that will bring impact into the enterprise. That's why if you see the double arrow between the requirement management, this actually is the role of the so-called the meta model inside the repository that we inform the various entity which are the one that are impacted, and they need to get a so-called understand the analysis, how the transformation itself bring changes to the organization. Yeah. So hopefully I give you a very brief overview on the what is TOGAF in like 2-3 minutes. Okay, so these are the model on the meta model, the example, the meta model. So basically there should be some sort of the traceability between business, application and technology. And on the left hand side, if you see all the diagram in the multiple colors like yellow, blue, green, purple, there is actually denoting about the yellow is about the business elements, the blue is about application elements, and the green is about technology or infrastructure, and the purple is about all the motivation and yeah, motivation and the strategy. So with this is basically my final slide before I hand over to the team. So basically, this is about digital enterprise architecture, that we have a data architecture model, business architecture, application architecture, and technology architecture. They're taking the context of the enterprise. Then, of course, we also have the digital services and the security that are mandatory, especially today in the cybersecurity era. Then, of course, there is also a digital. With that, we can execute the digital transformation and, of course, plan for the execution framework. And once this is done, we can develop so-called the solution architecture. Just now I mentioned about solution building block. Then with that, we can execute the transformation with a project through the PMO. Yeah, so basically, this is where we have a lot of the so-called proper digital transformation initiative. So the engine to drive the so-called digital transformation is coming out from the digital enterprise architecture, which is the combination of the practice of the framework, notation, as well as the platform, the tool like evolution itself. Okay, so basically with the enterprise architecture itself, we can drive a lot of the strategic planning, the portfolio planning, vendor management, as well as all the so-called risk and so-called transformation plan. Yeah. So with that, I think I hand over to Dr. Tim.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me, Aaron?
Yep, can hear you.
Okay, great. Sorry, I've had some technical hitches here at my end, and my laptop packed it in. So, okay, let's see how we go. Though, do you want to give me ability to share my screen? Okay, great. So, all right, let me go through some slides. So, yeah, look, thank you for that. My laptop did freeze. Apologies. So, I'm not sure. Hopefully, this comes through okay now. Let me go into slideshow mode, hopefully. Okay, let me go down some slides here. So yeah, you've obviously had my introduction, so I'll try and get through these. But yes, as Aaron said, I've been with the company now since we started, which is almost 20 years ago now. So yeah, I've got a lot of experience. I've worked on lots of big projects around the world. The company itself, Evolution, we've got offices all around the world. I'm based out of our Sydney office in Australia. We've got an office, a satellite office in Singapore. So that's where we'll support Aaron and his team from. But yeah, we're all around the world with clients in more than 100 countries now. Okay, so let's have a look at this topic specifically. So when we talk about digital and we talk about the whole EA practice in the digital world, obviously this year, 2020, has thrown us some curveballs, and what we found is that as much as it was, and it always has been a focus to be digital, it's become more so. So you can see there a statistic that's come out of Gartner, and this was even last year. They basically had already started to show a ramp up in a third of the finance CIOs Identify digital as a top priority. So again, what does digital mean? We'll look into that. But Aaron's already talked about this, where he talks about a digital map, having some digitization of your business. Okay, so that's where you're starting to codify and use structured designs to describe your business. So whether that's through diagrams, whether it's through catalogs, matrices, all the different things that something like TOGAF advocates as different artifacts or different views that you might take. So yes, and then this year, 2020, of course, we're all aware, with COVID-19, remote working is now, of course, the norm. We're all working from home, as you can see. I'm at home. So all around the world now, all the different people. So that, of course, throws a whole lot of challenges, as you've seen. I've thankfully had a backup laptop, so I've switched to that. One of my laptops packed it in. Needless to say, cybersecurity now is a big challenge, making sure that everything's secure with VPNs and things like that. So, yep, just quick sound check. So it's all okay, is it, Aaron? The audio's okay and the screen sharing's okay? Yeah, great. Okay, sorry, I was a bit concerned because I've gone to an old laptop here. Right, let's have a quick look. So Aaron already showed you a bit of the footprint for ATD, and that's of course the Southeast Asian region. So we have an office in Singapore, like I said. We have offices in the Middle East, in Europe, North America, South America. So we've certainly expanded all around the world. There'll be more offices coming online over time. But yeah, as it is now, we've got pretty good footprint. We certainly can, as they say, follow the sun. So there's always someone awake in evolution somewhere in the world. So the support team is always on 24/7. We kind of follow the sun with that development as well as similarly done. Yeah, a couple of the sort of logos of the clients that we have in the finance sector. Some of those you probably recognize, UOB in Singapore. Then there's other ones that, of course, the headline names that you'd know, companies like Barclays in the UK and AXA in Europe, and even Standard Chartered actually in Singapore as well is another client of ours. So we've got we have thousands of clients, right? So this is just a sort of a selection of some of the ones that hopefully you guys recognize. And with Aaron and his team, we'll obviously be expanding out to some more finance. What that is interesting though is that we're building a lot of benchmarks, we're building a lot of expertise in this domain. Okay, and I'll talk a fair bit about reference models and talk about things like BIAN, ABACUS, of course, an insurance one. But we're building some domain knowledge, which of course we're trying to get the different clients of ours to collaborate. So there's user groups and things like that where they can do that and share things with as much as it's sanitized, but they can share things with each other and do work that obviously benefits the whole industry. Right, where do you start though? So financial services obviously is transforming like every industry. This is a kind of like a bit of a word cloud. Really what you're seeing is all the standard sort of things that most businesses are looking at, understanding, roadmaps, looking at customer experience, of course, digital transformation, migrating to the cloud, all those sort of things. What we've learned, I've been doing this for enough years now, is there's a phrase which is, don't try and boil the ocean, right? So don't try and do everything. Pick a few use cases, indeed pick one use case, which already has buy-in from the business stakeholders, which as Aaron said, technology underpins every business strategy. That's a fact of life, and it's more so now. So pick a use case that you already have some sort of traction with and apply the enterprise architectural rigor to that. Get yourself a quick win. You certainly want to have some success stories to talk about. Within 3 to 6 months, you should absolutely be delivering something of value that quickly. You probably know through Gartner, they talk about time to value as one of their metrics, and we always come out #1 with that. Number of reasons I won't go into today, but really try to deliver some benefit very quickly. Okay, the business is impatient, like everyone. So need to say, pick a use case that is actually, I won't say easy, but has some traction already. Something that an enterprise architectural approach will benefit and give some rigor and some quantitative guidance to. Couple of case studies, some success stories. So these again are companies that I presume most of you have heard of. So the MAN Group is a big investment group based out of Europe. So they've done a lot of application work with ABACUS. So they need to look at assessing applications and deciding on the roadmaps for them and things like that. So all these are well documented case studies we can provide to you. If you drop Aaron an email or myself, I'll give my contact details at the end. And we can give you these. I think these are available through the website as well if you want to go to our site and download them. KLP's a big pension provider in Norway. They're the largest one there. So again, they had particular ideas around governance, you know, and there was, of course, all the, you know, the GDPR stuff that came out of Europe. I presume you guys are all familiar with that. So, yeah, the whole interesting side around data privacy. So, yeah, they needed to have some quick ways that they could provide information to people when they requested it. So there's all different regulations under that. First Interstate Bank in the US, again, they're very tightly integrated. It's a small architecture team, but they're very tightly integrated with the business. And so the business have these questions, you know, they go into these meetings with their tablets and they ask them questions, you know, who's responsible for this process, you know, what applications support it, you know. So having that digital map, as Aaron calls it, you know, that you know, we talk about it as, you know, the single source of truth, you know, the enterprise on a tablet, right? You know, having that available to you, and it's, you know, interactive, you can click on buttons and drill in, and I'll show you some of this stuff. Being able to do that on the fly is very important because it answers the questions right there and then as the business wants to in the time frame that they're interested in. Okay, so yeah, specifically financial services. What do the EAs need in the financial services industry? So we use this phrase, it's about end-to-end connectedness. Okay, so ultimately, if you're just, you know, dumping in different artifacts and, you know, you've got like a disjoint, you know, spreadsheet, and you've got a disjoint, you know, Visio diagram or PowerPoint slide deck, or even if you're embedding, you know, just basic diagrams in some, you know, kind of web-based platform, there's no connectedness. Okay, there's no line of sight, as Aaron talked about, all the way potentially from strategy through to execution. Okay, now again, don't boil the ocean. You don't have to have everything perfectly well captured, but being able to reason about, you know, why is something here? You know, how is it contributing to the overall business goals? You know, understanding something about the context of things, which you get through a connected repository. So where everything is, you know, got some sort of interrelationships between things. And, you know, ArchiMate talks about that with the layers between the different domains, right? So every framework has a way, of course, of thinking about this, but ultimately it is just fundamentally showing the entire enterprise, or potentially the entire enterprise, in a single place. Okay, so we call that, of course, the digital business or the digital enterprise. It's the digital map. So having all that stuff end to end. Now, financial services EAs, like all EAs, that's a, you know, that's a mandatory requirement. You know, being able to actually have all that stuff at your fingertips. Now, again, let's not be too scared here. This doesn't mean, you know, boiling the ocean. So I've said that one twice now. We have all these accelerators. Okay, and this is what I'll talk a bit about today. There are reference models out there that are quick starts to how you do this. So there's kind of two types. There's ones which are domain specific. Okay, so again, something like BIAN or BIAN is an industry, a banking one. ACORD is insurance. APQC, which comes out of the US, they have a whole lot of industry reference models as well. But then there are some cross-domain models. Okay, so ArchiMate, TOGAF, which we're certified to support both of those. You know, even BPMN and any of the notations, UML, any of those sort of things, they're cross-industry or cross-domain. Okay, so you can use those, and indeed building a hybrid where you start with some business reference model and then underpin that with a structural repository like TOGAF is perfectly great. Okay, and I'll talk about that as, you know, these hybrids. And again, one of the reasons we have this fast time to market is these accelerators, and because ABACUS is highly configurable, right? You can just mash these things together, drag and drop different frameworks together very quickly. You're not wrestling with the tool, you know, to try and get your content in. You know, the tool will adapt to the information you have to hand, be it an off-the-shelf framework like BIAN, or, you know, something like TOGAF, and obviously supports all the methodologies there that Aaron and his team can help you do. Now, of course, another phrase we like to use is citizen-driven enterprise architecture, or democratizing enterprise architecture. You know, making this team, you know, making it a team of people that are collaborating together, putting this in the hands of the information owners. Okay, so this is, you know, an animation showing like a catalog and how people can be managing it. It's like a spreadsheet online, right? Managing information relevant to their world. So you use all your permissions to, you know, quarantine what people are working on. But either way, you know, just make it very easy for people to contribute work and their information into the repository. You know, you're not stuck drawing diagrams necessarily. So we'll talk about the, you know, the kind of the tension, or dare I say the complement between what we call data-driven and diagram-driven enterprise architecture. So certainly being data-driven is very efficient. Okay, people are used to filling in lists, right? It's very easy. We have a great online way of doing that. Integrating though with the sources of truth you have already. Okay, so certainly even just as far as your Active Directory integration and single sign-on, so we can onboard people very quickly. We typically embed within Teams or Slack or something like that, so people don't have to remember URLs or anything like that. They just get in, fill in the content they need to do. But integrating with other repositories you might have. So whether you've got all of your servers in ServiceNow or something like that, whether you've got content in SharePoint, pulling in things like that to build a repository quickly, and of course collaborate on it and keep it up to date. The worst thing you can have is that dinosaur, that repository that was last touched 5 years ago and is completely out of date. This is a living, breathing artifact that people should be using. Okay. Now, of course, if you've got lots of content, you do need to segment that, and you need to make it role-based. Okay, you need to give people a dashboard. We call them the dashboards, collections of portlets. You'll see that, which basically is content relevant to them. So TOGAF gives you a lot of guidance about stakeholder management, what views are of interest to stakeholders. So there's a lot of work out there that can help you shape the dashboards for people. We, of course, have dashboards off the shelf that we can use. Essentially, a dashboard is something that should be trying to answer a question for somebody. Okay, so we talk about them as either mission-based, so they might be doing like an application rationalization or a GDPR piece of work. They might be role-based, so you might be an application manager, so you need to see your world, right? So there's different ways. There's project-based dashboards where people are obviously contributing content relevant to their project, and that's a way of sourcing information. But either way, these self-service dashboards, they're dashboards that people get. It's like their start screen. It's what they use. They just fill in things and they edit a diagram, update a catalog, whatever it might be, do some impact analysis, and I'll show you that kind of stuff. But it's all relevant to their world. Okay, and that makes it obviously very easy, and it's familiar to them. Don't get too bogged down in notations. Okay, you do need to have some consistency, so people, obviously talking the same language. But yeah, don't get too caught up. If someone likes to use one notation versus another, that's fine. A repository should be able to support that. We certainly can. Okay, let's have a quick look at, essentially this whole world around reference models and where this is at. So, yep, some familiar statistics, I'm sure, for you guys. No matter how much we think things are off the shelf, yeah, they get configured. So certainly the statistics we have are better than half of off-the-shelf things almost gets configured still, right? ABACUS is the same. We're an off-the-shelf product. You can use it on day one using one of our standard accelerators and our standard reference models. But because it's configurable in your hands, you will spend time adding a new field, adding a new notation, tweaking the dashboards, doing all that yourself. So, obviously, giving you control over your own repository is very important. And, Aaron and his team have the expertise to be able to do that configuration for you and help you shape a repository that answers the questions you guys have. And obviously, we're living with a lot of legacy. So, trying to pull in some of that content and be able to, make it, at least visible and understandable is pretty important. So this is, again, where a reference model comes in. And I'll look at BIAN in particular today, but there's any number of other ones. I've mentioned, APQC has them. There's, if you're in insurance industry, there's ACORD. We support all of these, but I only had time to really look at one today. So, so a reference model just gives you a good, common point of place, okay? Something that people can be familiar with. It has boxes that they hopefully recognize. It's standard, so they can talk between companies. You can look at benchmarking. Okay, you can look at how much you're doing for check processing versus the industry standard. So there's lots of things like that that we have benchmarks. Okay, so yeah, let's have a quick look at BIAN or BIAN. So that it's I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with it. If you're not, it's all freely available online. Go and have a look. It's bian.org. It should be easy to find. So yeah, look, essentially it's a collection of best practices. It has a lot of content, and I'll show you some of this. It has thousands of objects well reasoned in there, which we of course support and you can use. It is a membership-based organization though, so while we can support it and we provide it, you do need to be a member of BIAN, which isn't expensive, so certainly I'd encourage you to join to be able to make use of it and things like that. So and obviously they want you to contribute and give your perspective on things and tweak things. So it's pretty active in its refresh cycle. So they're at version 8 now. That actually came out about a year ago. So they do tend to come out every kind of 1 to 2 years. So certainly it's continually being refreshed. Now, every company who adopts it ends up configuring it and changing it as well. So ultimately it goes through a standards process where they accept some of the modifications that people have done. So it has essentially a service-oriented architecture philosophy behind it. So they have what's called the service landscape, and I'll show you this in ABACUS in a sec. It's essentially a hierarchical, functional model. Okay, so it starts with what they call business areas, then business domains, and then goes down through to service domains. Okay, so it's many layers. I think it's 4 at least layers, and there's over 300 service domains that they define. There's then processes that are aligned with these service domains. There's a basic organizational structure that matches the service domains. So really what you're looking at is that, that business architecture is reasonably well put together. So you now just need to underpin it with your specifics. What applications do you use, right? How are you actually organizationally structured? So they start with like departments. They have like 6 departments. So how do you then break down your organizational structure underneath the covers? So, the process side of things is done pretty well. And if you think of, architecture as the holy trinity of 3 things, people, process, and technology, you've just got to fill out the technology dimension and the people dimension, okay? But the process dimension is really well defined. Now, the information dimension is also in there too, and I'll show you that. There's a whole object kind of, side to things, information objects and stuff like that too. So you get a lot of this stuff and you don't have to, of course, reinvent the wheel. But remember, this is an industry reference model, right? So it doesn't really advocate how you should do those things underneath, the technology layer, let's say, underneath, okay? So that's where you can use, of course, something like TOGAF, okay? So TOGAF or ArchiMate, these are very strong when it comes to doing technology architecture. Okay, they of course have a position on business architecture and things like that. But if you're going to use something like BIAN, then you of course want to take the BIAN layer at the top and underpin it with something like TOGAF beneath it. Okay, and that's fine. We've got those repositories. You can start with that. It's one of our accelerators. We have all these different hybrids that people can choose from, and off they go, start filling in things. Now, of course, we support, the OMG standards as well, like business process modeling, business process and modeling notation, UML, there's BPMN, which is the business motivation model. There's lots of different approaches there as well that we support. Okay. Fundamentally, though, you've got to select a framework, as it says here, that works. Okay. We don't sell any of our frameworks. Okay, they're all freely available. Now, as I mentioned, you might have to be a member of something like BIAN to be able to use it, but from our point of view, we don't charge anything from any of our frameworks, okay? The reason for that is because we encourage people to adopt, to adapt them and change them and make hybrids, work out things that work perfectly well for them, okay? So we don't try to do that. We want to teach you guys how to do that and work with, Aaron and his team to do that, because it's not in our interest to try to own that. That meta model, that part of it is yours. That's your way you describe your business. So you do have to ask some questions though. You do have to decide, well, am I addressing my stakeholder needs with what I'm doing, right? Can I, of course, do that line of sight from top to bottom? So is it just a business one or just a technology one? So of course, when we talk about BIAN with ArchiMate, you've got pretty good coverage there, right? Sorry, BIAN with TOGAF, you've got pretty good coverage, okay? There's a maturity concept that does need to sort of flow through this. When you start off, you want to start simple. And I talked about doing something of value quickly, within 3 to 6 months. So you certainly don't want to be, starting off with an application register that's got 50 columns and, filling in your thousands of rows. That's too much. You don't need to do that, right? Start with a very simple application list. And of course, you've probably already got it in a spreadsheet. So just import it and that's fine. And then, make it a live sheet in ABACUS as a catalog. And of course, ABACUS is future-proof. It's all very configurable. You can change anything you want. We're never going to box you into a corner in how you represent things. You can refactor meta models on the fly. It's very simple to do. Now, of course, it has pervasive effects, so you've got to do it with caution, and there's whole governance process behind that. But it certainly can be done. There's the Spider-Man one-liner, which is just because you can doesn't mean you should. With great power comes great responsibility, right? So there's a lot of power there, but you do have to be cautious about what you do. But you can. Okay, just a quick little sort of position statement on how we see this, data-driven versus diagram-driven. You'll hear a fair bit in the market from different vendors of those two camps, and we could happily plonk some competitors' logos into those two sides there. So newer to the market are some new entrants that talk about being data-driven. okay, and they, they're all about, list-based stuff and whatever tabular information and stuff like that, and they're usually very weak in a diagrammatic sense. They can generate diagrams maybe, but they're pretty weak. The historical tools are much more stronger in the modeling and the diagramming side of things, okay, and they, a lot of them came out of just drawing tools, right? So we've been around for 20 years, right? We've been doing both of these. The research we did back in, the last, before 2000 was all about, how can you obviously build a single repository that has all these different types of views, whether they're catalogs, whether they're diagrams, doesn't matter. What we want to be able to do is analyze the information that's there, do roadmaps, do all the different value add you get by having a digital view of the business. And we've been doing this for 20 years, right? We've got the best of both worlds here. If you certainly want to be diagram heavy, that's fine. If you want to be data heavy, that's fine. We of course think you should do both, okay? And then exploit. We've got machine learning, right? We've got no-code analytics. We've got lots of really cool things that go on top of that that really pulls those two different perspectives together. So that's just my kind of my kind of caution is be careful. Don't be sold the diagramming dream or the data dream. Obviously be sold both. There's no reason not to have both, and we offer both and have for forever. That's how we started 20 years ago. A couple of quick sort of example dashboards. I'll show you some BIAN ones. So these are just generic ones. This one's really just showing you fundamentally the result of some of the finance algorithms we have. So, we practice what we preach, and we work in the financial services industry. So we have algorithms that can do, total cost of ownership and, different technical debt calculations and enterprise debt calculations. So we have different, monetary algorithms. There's a couple of animations going on here, but, ultimately looking at different scenarios. You can see the 4 different $9 billion numbers there, looking at different scenarios. So we can have multiple states of the repository and then compare the same set of metrics across different states. Okay, so you can look at options. You can say, well, what if we did this or that? Cost it out, right, by running the algorithms. And they're just continually running. We have an algorithm engine that's just continually running, doing the different analytics that you might design. And again, that's all done through no code, which I'll show you a bit of later. But yeah, fundamentally using metrics to make decisions. So this stuff doesn't have to be qualitative. It can also include, of course, a qualitative dimension and the different aesthetics about how you might design something and diagrammatically. But don't turn your back on metrics. Numbers are very important, with all the caveats of measurement theory, which I won't go into. But don't confuse precision with accuracy. Just because we give you an answer to, like here, these nine significant figures. There is some variation on that. It's not necessarily accurate to 5 decimal places, right? Yep, a little quick animation about our no-code stuff, and again, I'll show some of this in the demo. Yeah, look, essentially, we want people to be being quantitative about this, right? So we put a lot of work into building this and putting this into your hands, okay? So we don't have to write these algorithms behind the scene. They're not hard-coded into ABACUS, mysterious black boxes. We no-code these. We provide them to you. There's a whole library online. We have a whole community where people share their algorithms. You can go in there, contribute your algorithm, download algorithms, apply them to your repository, okay? So algorithms should be a commodity that's shared around. Okay, now companies will tweak them and customize them to be specific to their own business, and you might want to keep that as some valuable IP that you don't share. But fundamentally, this should be in your hands. How do you work out what is risk? How do you work out what is security? How do you work out what is cost? We can give you a starting place and give you a no-code algorithm, but you should tweak it. We definitely believe in transparency. Right? We've got a whole graph database. We don't hide anything. Nothing's encrypted. And you guys can see everything that's in there with all the security side of things, of course. But likewise, all the algorithms, they're all perfectly transparent. Okay, we give them to you. They're no-coded, so you can see and tweak them and change them. So you don't have to live in a bit of a black box. Trust is a very important thing. I did a big presentation about trust recently. But you're going to, when you're working with business stakeholders, they're going to want to trust your recommendations. Okay, so the best way to build that trust is to be transparent and say, look, this is the algorithm we've used, and here it is. There's nothing mysterious here. If we've done something wrong, let's find it. Let's change it. Right. So you obviously can tweak things and get them to be right. It's not just a mysterious black box. There's also a whole topic to be had about hybrid analytics. Okay, what I mean by that is merging deterministic and non-deterministic analytics. Okay, so a no-code algorithm is a deterministic algorithm, right? You give it a single set of inputs, it'll give you the same output each time. We have a whole machine learning dimension to ABACUS, okay? Whole AI dimension. So the machine learning can produce numbers and insights as well. So you actually can harvest those two things into algorithms. Okay, so you can build up things. And I'll talk about this, how you can kind of make suggestions. And this is the important thing, is the tool will suggest something. That doesn't mean you should necessarily adopt it. Okay, so ultimately it's still an architect's decision, what should be done. Okay, let's just take a quick segue now to how I wanted to try and show you ABACUS. So sorry, I have had to jump to another machine. So I'll go into this again. Should be able to. This has got single sign-on, so it should just sign me in. So Aaron, I'm not sure if you're there. Just let me know if you can see my screen. Okay, I think it should be okay. It's definitely quite zoomed in on this monitor. Okay, so I'm in BIAN. Okay, so like I say, BIAN is just a reference model off the shelf. That's what it is. It talks about service domains. Okay, so it has over 300 of those, which I'm guessing you guys can't read at this resolution. Sorry, there's lots of service domains in here. For example, that one, securities, delivery, and receipt management. That's the sort of familiar view that people know, the service landscape, and as I said, it's version 8. So behind the scenes, though, with this is an entire, what we would certainly call a service catalog. Okay, it's literally a catalog, which means a list of things. Okay, so you can see there's over 300 rows in this catalog. Lots of metadata around these services. So of course, descriptions and things like that. And as we go out to the right here, you can see there's business roles, there's what's called a control record, which is essentially the kind of deliverable or the document that's involved. You've got examples, you've got objects like information that's involved, you've got processes that are involved, you've got departments that should be using it. So you've got a whole lot of interconnectedness. So the service as it is, and it's a service-oriented architecture, the service as it is the hub. It's the hub that joins together technology, process, people together. Okay, and you've got to think of it like that. Too often when people think of service-oriented architecture, and certainly the ArchiMate's guilty of this, they have this layered approach where you have these layers in between your business application, let's say technology as a simple 3-layered model, and then a service layer in between. The problem you have with that is this effect we call the Michelin man. You're effectively forcing a very rich layer through an abstract layer, and you lose a lot of the structure of your actual enterprise. Okay, you should definitely think of it a different way, which is a service is like in that case, a ternary relationship, so a 3-way relationship that binds people, process, and technology together. A service technically can bind as many different dimensions together as you want. Okay, so we certainly have services binding like 7 dimensions together, right? Anyway, so that's a more rigorous way of thinking of a service-oriented architecture. It's not a layered approach, which is what ArchiMate advocates, and I disagree with. It's more of a hub, a way of interconnecting things that are in different domains. Okay, so this is the way BIAN looks at things, which is great. Now these are explorable, and when you start doing that kind of impact analysis, like I can drill into this, right? So I can go into this. So a tree map is of course like a landscape view, right? It's showing you exactly those same rows on the left, but hierarchically grouped. Okay, so I'm now down at 2 levels. If I go into this area, the cross-product operations, right? You can see that the catalog on the left is filtering, right? We're down to only 39 service domains now, grouped into these 4 different business areas. Okay, and we're 3 levels down the hierarchy now. But you can start to kind of understand how these things interact with each other. On the right here, and some of these graphs we've got here, we're showing essentially the popularity of different, in this case, object classes or control records. So you can see here already that the majority of service domains actually have a single control record for each of them, okay? Which is okay, but it is a lot of documentation, okay? As opposed to the information side of things, right? So over on the right here, we can see some different information objects. So that's payments as an object, this sort of, I think accounting. So, if I click this payment one, right, it's going to go and filter. I have to mouse off, so it tells the other portlets to update. It's filtered it down to 4. There's 4 service domains that are using this information object. Okay, and we're just exploring the repository. If I go out here, you'll see that, of course, they're all using payments as an object class here. These are now the processes that are involved, and of course, in in this case, there's no information underpinning that. When we talk about people and technology, we haven't underpinned it there. But you've got all the different bits out of BIAN, of course, off the shelf. So your challenge, of course, would now be to fill in these parts. Right? It is as simple as just double clicking and starting to fill in things, right? It's it's very easy to be populating here. It is a case of obviously democratizing this, right? Because you've got hundreds and hundreds of rows of things to do. So needless to say, lots of content there that is all kind of filtered together. But if we go and have a look now in another dashboard, so we've gone through like kind of the service layer. Let's drill in and have a look at one of these service domains. So let's have a look at one that's called check processing. There's 300 of these. We could have used any. Essentially, it's down within the payments, as you saw, like just where I went in the hierarchy. It's down inside payments domain. But this is where you start to see how things are connected. Now we've got a diagram here. Okay, it is just I was going to say a box and line, but I guess it's circles and lines. We're using a notation here, right? Again, BIAN doesn't advocate any notation. By notation, I mean literally the symbols we're using here. ArchiMate doesn't have a notation either. Okay, so you want to try and choose something that's palatable to the business. These sort of notations we've got here, we've got lots of these. You can import any shape from Visio you like. Okay, you can design your own shapes. But these sort of notations are pretty good. They're generic. They don't come with much baggage. Okay, your enterprise will have their own notation, right? So one of the things you'll certainly do is configure this and change it to be familiar for people. But what you can see here is the different dimensions that are intersecting with check processing, right? You've got the different processes here. Okay, you've got the department there. Okay, you've got other service domains. So the service domains are interconnected. Okay, you've got technology. So there's a couple of applications here. Okay, and then you've got all those objects, right? Those data entities that are involved. Okay, so you've got people, process, technology, right? All integrated with a service concept as the hub, right? Okay, so you can see that it's this kind of trinity of relationships being pulled together. There's other ways you can explore this kind of stuff. So we have this thing which is called a graph view. Okay, so essentially it's using the same notation that you might be doing in a diagram, but it's it's a lot more interactive. I can click on a node here and explode it. So that's done the same thing. That's taken check processing and shown me now the applications. Okay, so you can see Aperta here. It's got the processes. It's got the finance department, right? So the same content that you might be seeing, can be shown in different ways. So these graph views are pretty powerful ways of exploring repositories. You can go and explore anywhere you need to, and see whatever things are connected to. So I won't go too far through there, but it's a great, simple way to explore how things are interconnected, right? And find where complexity is. Obviously a big fan out is a lot of complexity. Okay, but you can produce these sort of dashboards. Remember, self-service. This might be for the domain architect or the service architect who's responsible for this domain, right? In this service domain. So you can auto-generate all these sort of things, right? So you don't need to pre-can them. Okay, let's move into the technology world. So remembering what you're wanting to do is take something like BIAN and then apply a standard set of content beneath the covers, right? So taking the business layer from BIAN and underpinning it with your technology. So this is a very simple application list. I'm sure you've all got your spreadsheets with your hundreds of applications in them with whatever properties you're already tracking. So again, ABACUS can just adapt to whatever metadata you have. So there's a very simple list here. This is we've got some example applications in here. It's all just kind of dummy data. But you've got some interesting properties here, right? You've got things like the application criticality. Okay, you've got things like a recommendation, and we'll come back to that. But essentially, you're starting to look at whether a future state for it. You're trying to say, look, these are applications that we like, and so we want to try to retain them. So there's different models. You would have heard of TIME, which is tolerate, invest, migrate, eliminate. So that's one that Gartner advocates. There's another one called 4Rs, which is retain, refresh, redesign, retire. These are these quadrant-based approaches, which are actually deterministic, right? So you can do a business fit versus a technology fit. So we have algorithms for all these things. We've got lots of them. And so you can take factors like the criticality, okay? You can take a factor like how many users does it have? You can take a factor like what standards, what technology standards is it using? These things all can influence the algorithm, which has been no-coded, to come up with a suggestion for what we think the future state should be. So remembering, the suggestion doesn't mean that's your decision, right? Your recommendation. Okay? A suggestion is just the machine In this case, giving a recommendation. That may be a machine learnt recommendation, it may be a deterministic algorithm, or a combination of both of those things. Okay. So the idea being, though, is you're managing this technology stuff, but you're underpinning your whole service model, which you're getting from BIAN, with the context of all these applications. Okay, so now you start to have an understanding of, where do they all fit in? And you're maintaining this in a nice democratic way. There's lots of people doing that. Okay, and obviously once you've got that, you can start to do a lot of that analytics. So this is a standard application portfolio dashboard. Again, I won't go into this too much. We've got whole webinars about this. That's showing you that kind of portfolio view where you might look at like business fit versus technical fit. Okay, so the top right quadrant are applications that both the business and the IT teams are happy with. Okay, so they're probably ones that you're going to invest in. Okay, they're certainly ones you're going to retain. Okay, the bottom left, of course, are ones where both sides are unhappy. Okay, and so they're probably ones you're going to retire. Top left, okay, is where the technical fit is low, but the business fit is high. So that's clearly a tech refresh quadrant. Okay, so you can see how this is all pretty deterministic. If you can score it for business fit and technical fit, you can already start to make a suggestion. And that's important here because those colors are actually the recommendation. Okay, and you can see that in the catalog here, like retain as green, retire as red. Okay, so the recommendation for CRM, okay, is bottom right. Okay, down here, the recommendation is, maybe actually to refresh it, even though it's on the borderline. Here we've got something that we're saying, look, we should retire it, even though the business is happy with it. And then there might be a whole evolution, what we talk about as an evolution, a scenario where you're showing how that application is getting retired, but we're replacing it with a better one. Okay, so all that kind of road mapping side of things is possible, which takes us to the next dashboard, which is, of course, the classic kind of road mapping way of looking at things. So again, we've done whole presentations about this. I won't spend too long on this, but a roadmap is kind of means many things to many people. We talk about 4 types of roadmaps, okay? A Gantt chart, which is what you're looking at here, is actually what we call a type 2 roadmap. All you need to do a Gantt chart is some date properties. Okay, and you can see that in the catalog at the bottom there. So if I was to go and explore one of these, let's go into maybe finance, right? The finance dashboard, so the finance roadmap has a collection of applications there, in fact, just 4 of them, and they've got their individual timelines. We can call this a life cycle or a timeline as well, with dates. You can see those dates down the bottom there, they're all editable. But what we normally find happens is people calculate those dates, okay? So once something's gone into production, okay, you might have various standards on the technologies that you're using. Those standards might be going end of life. Okay, so you now start to infer the end of life for an application due to the dates on the standards on the application. Where do you get those dates from? We have integrations with things like Technopedia, okay, which are, there's literally millions and millions of standards with their end of life dates that we can use, and you can then infer those dates into a roadmap. Now, remembering all of these things should still only be seen as suggestions. Because you might now go, oh, I've identified a problem here. This thing's going end of life because that standard, Win 7 or whatever's out of support. So I need to go and do a tech refresh and, of course, extend that data out. So yeah, don't get too hopeful that this is going to just solve your problems for you. It's just throwing up suggestions, right? It's giving you insights into your portfolio, and it's hopefully informing your decision making so that you can defend it. You're doing all this live, like this all works on a tablet, of course, and you're doing this live when you're in a business meeting and someone's asking, oh, why are we retiring IVR? And you go, oh, okay, well, it's got end of life because it's using, whatever, SQL Server something that's going end of life, so we need to actually port it across to this other application and rah, rah, rah. So you can have that whole conversation with the business right there and then, which of course builds trust, okay, and expands out your value to the organization because you now get involved in all of those decisions and obviously empower people to make informed decisions. Okay. The last one I'm going to just pop up here is actually just a quick dashboard that does show a bit under the covers some of the things that are there. So we've got some KPI portlets here, which are those numbers and stuff like that. So they're being calculated. And you can see a no-code algorithm there that I've got on the right. I'm not going to edit any of these here today. We've got webinars about all that. But basically, it's block-based. So what this algorithm is doing is it's simply looking at each business domain, okay, counting up the complexity, which is essentially counting up how many applications are involved in delivering that business domain, and then writing that number back onto the business domain. So it seems very simple, right? But it's obviously a very powerful algorithm that starts to give you some insight into the complexities you might have in your portfolio. Now, we can compare those complexities with benchmarks. Okay, that's something like BIAN is particularly good for. So when we come back to looking at, right back to where we started with the landscape view, which is a diagram, a whole lot of boxes, there's actually ways you can quickly heat map that. Okay, so I've got a heat map here, which is the same landscape, but this time heat mapped according to complexity, only in a few areas. So I'm not sure if you can see the color differences there, but there's kind of some stronger red versus softer red, more salmon colors. So being able to draw the attention of the users to where you think there's unnecessary complexity in your enterprise is very powerful, right? That's just a dashboard, in this case a single diagram, that just continually updates. So as your application owners are doing whatever they're doing, filling in their portfolios, making decisions, so as you've democratized the whole way that people are tracking the digital map or the digital business that you've got, these sort of dashboards are continually being updated, and your business stakeholders can see what's going on here. And you can obviously use this as a trigger for conversations you might want to have just by overlaying heat maps, or in this case, they're a color marker, onto a standard familiar view. So anyone who's familiar with BIAN would recognize this view, and you can start to actually, basically color it according to the way that, the different recommendations, or in this case, the criticality might be. I'll jump into one other one, maybe this one, this heat map. So this one, is just showing two markers on the different, this is about the top level, though, at the business domain level. So it's using an aggregated metric that's aggregating right up. These you can see some color markers down here, right? These color markers, they might be the cost of that business domain. They might be your reference to, your relative performance to benchmarks for that business domain. So this is the idea of these reference frameworks. It's using a familiar view, in this case, 300 boxes all grouped in a certain way, to communicate the underlying work that you're doing as an architecture office to come up with different recommendations and give insights and things like that. So yep, that's about it. So that's really, like I said, it's a bit of a whirlwind tour. We don't have too much time today. So yep, just to quickly wrap up and pass back to Aaron, and yep, we should have some time for some questions. We've got a great tool. We have the best tool on the market. We're the leader of all the Magic Quadrants and the Forrester Waves and all that kind of stuff. That's fine. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the team. But you would have heard the phrase, a fool with a tool is still a fool, right? The tool is not going to, replace any of us. It's just going to hopefully inform us. And we always talk about giving some quantitative guidance, right? So obviously it gives you some numbers. So these don't just become, subjective debates, right? They become objective conversations, okay? The model is going to be wrong. All models are wrong, but some are useful, right? It's going to be wrong. So, you've got to accept that, the tool is not going to be right, but it hopefully gives you, something you can use to have a conversation and, talk about things, with numbers and make things much more objective, okay? So just with that, so yeah, as I said, obviously go and have a look on our website. You've got the web address down the bottom right there, my contact details there. We're going to provide, well, this is being recorded, so obviously you can watch it back. I'm pretty sure we'll provide the slide decks to you guys, so you'll have all the contact details there. Yep, with that, I'm happy to pass back to you, Aaron, and I'll stop sharing my screen, I guess, and I'll leave you to facilitate the Q&A, I guess. So.
Thank you, Dr. Tim. I think very insightful information about the capability of the tool. And I think it is like, I remember about, I think 6-7 years ago, the year 2 landscape, the capability are quite primitive, but in the last 2 to 3 years, I think they are already catching up with the coolest and the latest technology. I think something quite striking to me about, the ability to some sort of intelligence. Maybe it's like half AI or full AI, but it's almost there. So the tool can suggest in terms of analyzing the impact, the meta model that we have defined, and can make a suggestion. That is nice, rather than
absolutely. We released that feature. It must be at least I'm going to say a year ago, but maybe it was only like 9 months ago. And obviously it's just running. It just runs behind the scenes. It learns from the content you put in. It's pretty mind-blowing what it does. So it essentially looks at the graph database, including all of the attributes or the metadata on any of the nodes in the database, and it builds a knowledge of how the structure is. Now that includes the properties, right? So you can literally, it'll learn that, hey, actually, when an application is delivering, 3 services and it's used by these teams, you scored at a criticality of 4, right? So it sees those patterns and it starts to suggest those things and goes, and so we have this autocomplete. That's how we talk about it. So when you're filling in a catalog, it'll auto suggest. It'll say, look, we think the score for this application is 6. And you can just go, yeah, wow, you read my mind, accept, right? So if you disagree, you put in your new number and it goes, oh, okay, and it builds on that and it goes, right, I was wrong, and it'll learn. So there's a feedback loop, of course. So yeah, so AI is a bit of a brave new world, and it's certainly in the EA domain, we're the only vendor who does anything like this. And yeah, it is pretty amazing, pretty powerful, and we're still scratching the surface of, I think, what's possible.
Yeah, because I think in the last 2 years that many of our client asking us when would be the AI come into the EA tool.
Yeah, great. Well, anyway, it came earlier. Download a trial, and you'll see it in like I say, in enterprise. You basically hover over a cell and you get like this little magic wand, and it suggests what values it thinks when it's blank, like it suggests, or it reconfirms what you've got there. Anyway, you'll see it's pretty amazing. So.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, maybe while waiting, Dr. Tim, do you have anything that you want to share in addition of what you have presented?
That's interesting. No, I mean, I wouldn't mind asking you a question, actually, Aaron, if that's all right.
Okay.
Yeah. So I know digital map. Okay, so I like that term. I like that you use that phrase. The good thing about a map is, usually there's, a sense of, where you are, I am here, or, something like that. So yeah, what's your feeling about giving people something familiar, like I talk about with, BIAN is a familiar kind of, landscape. You can recognize the, if you think of it like an actual map of the world, like you can recognize the outline of the countries or something like that. So what do you kind of usually talk about as a, something that's familiar, or the, the starting point that people find on the map? Is it, strategy? Is it, what is it? What do you?
Okay, basically the concept of the digital map, I think, derived from what I think GPS today, right? I'm not so sure whether in Australia are familiar or popular with the Waze. Waze is some sort of the last time, I think like 15 years ago, we used Garmin, right? 15 years ago or 20 years ago, Garmin was the most advanced GPS ever, because I learned about Garmin when I traveled to the US. So, all the car rental equipped with a Garmin. It's nice. You just enter the destination or the postal code or whatever name, they will guide you there. So you don't need to worry about, even you miss one turn, they will suggest you the next turn, right? So now I think the enterprise, and in the context of the world that we are living in, is highly complex. What I mean by highly complex is that I don't think we know what the other department is doing, even though, say, 2 years ago, I was in that department. But now, if you ask me about that department that I joined 2 years ago, the people have changed, the process already changed, and basically, I have no clue. And interestingly, in the enterprise is that between intra-department or inter-department, they actually are highly dependent. But however, in every department, they have a so-called person with the power. We call it departmental head, or head of department, or head of line of business, or vice president, etc. And this type of people, typically, they have a very high ego. And of course, I don't like to say the word office politics. Office politics kicks in all the department. And of course, when the highly organization, that high performing organization, the more political it is. And it is very, very difficult to transform. So the transformation is only the buzzword that came down from the top management to the all so-called enterprise level. But execution part, there is still a lot of the politics interference. That's why the power of enterprise architecture is that we need to define the meta model. Basically, is that we need to understand what so-called the structure, the elements in the enterprise, and we map that into the meta model. Once we have done that into the meta model, we can configure it into like the tool like evolution. So evolution is configuring so-called the enterprise meta model that we are so-called have defined, something like a database model of particular application. So we configure that, including all the parameters, the field, the dependency, the relationship, etc. Then after that, we execute filling up the information. this is where I think the digital map will come into life, into so-called a living artifacts in the enterprise. Yeah, I think this is, I think, many of the my encounter to many of the enterprises out there that they've implemented enterprise architecture. They're using the tool, but when I ask them about meta model, about relationship, about attribute, they all not, they have no clue about this, about that. That's why they are at the end of the day, they blame the enterprise architecture tool. They said this tool sucks. This tool doesn't give me what is being promised. But it's not, the tool don't give you the thing that is being promised, but you implement it wrongly, right? Imagine that you are going to buy a powerful CRM system, right? I don't want to mention that, but I don't want to mention any name. But you don't know how to configure the relationship about the about the buying history, about who has bought this, and then can we do a cross-selling, etc. So all that need to be defined properly. We need to have the attribute, we need to have the property, so that the CRM system can really help us to manage, to build a good relationship, a good rapport with our client using a technology. So the same thing with the EA2. That's why the digital map is something that quite critical, that many enterprises today, they don't have visibility. Even you are at the top level, you roughly know what that department is doing, but actually you don't know what is inside. And with the digital map, actually we can have so-called transparent see-through glass, that we can see what they are doing, and we can understand the impact that if we have some changes, what are the impact to other department, and vice versa. Okay, I think that will be the short explanation about the digital enterprise map.
So we've got a question here. I can read it out if you like, from Boon Chung Fa. So unless you're in an industry that is pretty matured, such as finance, that you can capitalize on frameworks such as BIAN, is it more typical for companies embarking on digital EA to build the company-specific EA model from mostly the ground up, based on the company's own priorities, albeit reusing some best practice dashboard as a starting point? So I certainly have an answer for that. Do you want to have a go at that? What do you see, Aaron?
Well, I think, beyond, okay, we have one experience implementing the, okay, of course, initially we call it BIAN and BIAN, but actually they said BIAN. in the original word is, I don't know what they call it, BIAN. So I think BIAN is quite plug and play, because I think like we've implemented with one of the regional bank. I think they are quite struggling maintaining their own capability model. In fact, they engage another consulting firm to develop their so-called capability model. But I mean, in the paper, look very pretty. Whatever this consulting company developed the capability for the so-called particular bank is very, very pretty. You will fall in love with the pictures, with the color, with the graphic, and etc. But when you go into the so-called the mapping into the actual bank, they basically is not helping at all. Doesn't help. Okay. So, however, this particular bank already used this so-called the existing mapping for the last 6 to 8 years. Okay. So 6 to 8 years they've been using it, and even the team who are maintaining this so-called capability, they told me that some of the thing doesn't make sense. Okay. But they don't know what are the thing better out there. Okay. Until I think we came about into BIAN, and also I introduced a BIAN. I think got Patrick. Patrick is one of the BIAN consultant there. So he explained the whole thing, and everything now fall into places, because BIAN not only giving a framework at the bank-wide level, as well, but BIAN also can drill down into the implementation, into the UML. Modeling into the ERD database. So it's quite so-called a round trip model that any financial services out there can just adopt and adapt, right? So it's quite nice. But of course, some of the industry don't have BIAN equivalent. Insurance, I think they got Accord and etc. So those industries don't have this particular framework out there available, reference model. Then they can start from scratch. no choice, right? We can't wait. So what happened is that typically they're understanding the TOGAF, they're understanding the ArchiMate, and also they're understanding the UML, BPMN, etc. And then they connect between ArchiMate, BPMN, and UML into so-called start small, right? We cannot start big. So start small, we understand the context, the problem at hand, the problem description, and then we start developing the meta model, and we connect the dot. And of course, eventually, 2 or 3 years, it will getting more complete, more refined, and at the end, you will get your internal very own meta model. I think that would be my share. Perhaps.
No, that's great. So yeah, so I guess the only thing I want to add to that is that you hear a lot about people talking about, you know, bottom up, top down, inside out, outside in, you know, outside out. You know, there's all these kind of, you know, philosophies out there. One that we've liked, and I've kind of, you know, like to reference, is actually the concept of active versus passive modeling. Okay, so the distinction there is neither one is better or worse than the other. Right? Because often, you know, you get into a bit of a debate about, well, top down's better than bottom up, and, you know, people take a big position, right? So active versus passive. Active modeling is where you basically say, look, we've got a lot of content. You know, I've got spreadsheets, I've got, you know, Visio diagrams, I've got, you know, plugins to ServiceNow, I've got, you know, right? So being able to pull all that content together, which is what you were referring to, Aaron. So, you know, just importing stuff, you know, if you've got 100 Visio diagrams, fine, you can import them. At the end of the day, you've got a repository, right? Now, it may all be disconnected, and, you know, it's just, you know, a whole lot of artifacts hanging together in a central place, but that's fine. That's a very active way of modeling. And then you start to go, well, what questions can this model answer? Okay, so you're very active about filling it up with content. That can start with a single project. Let's just load all the project content in. It could start with a single layer. Let's put all the applications in. You know, it start with a single service. Let's put everything related to a single service in. So you're being very active about what you're going to model. Okay, and that's fine. And that's a perfectly good way to start. If you've got a lot of content, don't get bogged down in meta models. Don't get bogged down in methodologies too much even. Yeah, upload the content. You might find that you've just got garbage in, you know, so obviously, you know, with the garbage in, garbage out, you know, qualifier. The flip side is what's called passive modeling. So passive modeling is a much more patient way of doing things. It's about saying, well, what are the questions I'm trying to answer? So we talked about those use cases, and someone says, well, I need a, you know, a digital strategy, or a, you know, so what is the question I'm trying to answer? Then you build just enough of a model to answer that question. So you go off and you do the audit, you find the artifacts that help inform, you interview people, maybe the stuff, you know, you do that forensics, you know, archaeology as people call it, you know, maybe this stuff doesn't even exist yet and you have to create it. Okay, and that's a perfectly valid approach if you're trying to answer specific questions. So I guess to the person's question is, yeah, BIAN or something like that is a great off-the-shelf thing. You can just go boom and dump it in there. But you haven't done anything with that until you underpin it with other stuff. Okay. Similarly, if you've got lots of stuff, you know, if you've got lists of things already, and you know people have documented things, then just collect that together. We have a whole maturity model for EA, right? So, you know, just getting a repository in the first place gets you onto the first run, right? You know, we don't care what's in it, but just centralizing this stuff, right? And absolutely, that's worth doing, you know, because now things just don't end up becoming stale and old. Okay, so yeah, absolutely. There's some industries that are more mature when it comes to a reference model than others. So, you know, things like finance. I mean, defense is a bit of a mixed bag. Defense, there was a big, you know, effort to get, you know, DODAF in the US, and then there was MODAF in the UK. Australia has one called DAF. So they tried to unify those together into one called UDPM, and that's pretty much stalled. So, you know, so there's work afoot in different industries to try to come up with reference models. But yes, I wouldn't advocate getting too caught up in that. If you've got content, you've got stakeholders who are already comfortable with the way you talk about things, you know, whether it's a business process or a business function, I don't really care. Get it into a repository and start to see, in that case, in an active modeling sense, what questions can I answer with that content? You know, be active about it. Be iterative. You know, produce things within 3 months. You know, don't just, you know, get a wallpaper and go, right, I've got to fill in the 300 boxes of BIAN. You know, you'll go down into a black hole for 3 years and you know, not get anywhere, right? So, you know, yes, be very tactical about things. So, yeah, good question. Sorry, yep. So there's another one. You want me to read this one out? Can you see it, Aaron? So from Kun Tek Chua. can we use EA to digital transform the construction industry? Yeah, well, we have. Anyway, so I'm not sure. Do you want me to take that one first, and then I can pass to you, Aaron? So yeah, we've done a lot of work. You might be pleased to know we've helped deliver a number of the Olympics over the years. So we helped deliver London 2012, the whole building of the whole London site, right? So we worked with one of our partners, which is Arup. I think, Kuhn, you might be from Arup, actually. So I don't know if you've talked to some of your colleagues in the UK, but we work with them. So yeah, we were modeling stadiums and pipes and, you know, all these kind of funny things, you know, emergency, you know, vehicles and access routes and stuff. So yeah, so certainly in the construction industry, it's been done. You do have to be careful what you do, though, because of course there's whole asset management, you know, practices and things like that we've got to be careful we don't, you know, tread on the toes of too much. So ultimately, though, when you're looking at the strategic side of things, or the business or the IT strategy side of things, delivering some big construction project, there's obviously, you know, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars on the line. These things need to be done with, you know, pretty reliable, you know, milestones and things like that. And so an EA approach can absolutely underpin those things. So yeah, no, we've certainly been involved in some big construction projects. We've done smart cities in the Middle East. You know, they've designed the whole, you know, the whole city using an EA approach. So no, there's absolutely some pretty amazing stuff. So yeah, so Kuhn, I'll get our account manager to connect you with some of the guys in London, because I know they've done some great work with us. So Arup, which I think you might be with, so they'll happily share. They've done some case studies on that too. So yeah, anything, Aaron? You've done it, I'm assuming, in Southeast Asia as well?
Okay. Yeah, basically, regardless of any vertical, right? Because today I think the digital transformation disrupt any kind of business. As long as you do business interacting with the client, now it's everyone being disrupted. And of course now it's a matter of survival. I mean, like, I think like even last year or 2 years ago that, you know, when talk about enterprise architecture, they said, well, I got a lot of project at hand. Even the next 2-3 years, I got many requests. So I don't think I can set aside time to do EA, because not in the priority list. The priority list is that to deliver a project. Of course, I cannot rebuild too much with the team or the organization that has told me that many initiatives, but it's just that typically I just, you know, tell them what would happen 5 years from now after you've completed all the 200 projects that you have on the list at hand. What happened with that project? Would that project sustainable for the next 5 years? That's my question, right? Secondly, of course, we have to think about the project that you are going to implement for the 200 list, right? How many of them overlapping? How many of them actually, how do you know the value of every project to the business? How do you know that? Right?
Yep.
Typically, it's all by request. Could be some small project, enhancement, etc. Then, of course, the third one is that would they end up into the digital island? And digital island is 10 times more scarier than the island of system today that we have.
Yep.
Because digital island is that multiple cloud, and you're trying to connect them in 5 years from now. I think it's almost like building a mission impossible, right? So all that thing need to be so-called thought through, and we need to understand the impact. That's why I think you know, the question is that people ask, would EA suitable for my organization, right? First thing, of course, I will ask, how big is your organization? If your organization only you and me, I think we can communicate well. I don't think I want to debate with you about whether you need EA, because what? Every day we have lunch together, every day we sit in the same room together. I know you, you know me, that's it. But when you have more than like 10 people that you don't know what they do, and everything diverse, they got multiple departments as you grow, and this is where the enterprise architecture helping to glue it together. Because like the, you know, the evolution type of the tier 2 is become a single source of truth. Because otherwise you have multiple sources of truth, and in the enterprise, when you have multiple sources of truth, it can create a so-called friction between the team, right? Definitely you're going to blame each other. And of course, when you communicate to external, 3 people from the same company messaging 3 different messages, and that's not good, right? Yeah. So many impact. And of course now, you know, in my video, I think I shared earlier is that if your organization can answer a question fast about any enterprise related question, then you don't need EA, right? So basically, if like you want to know what capability do we have, if I change the strategy, what's the impact to my organization? If you can answer that almost instantly, you don't need EA. That means you already have EA practice and embedded in your culture. But if you don't, If you can't answer that within, say, half a day, you need 1 week or 2 weeks to tell your boss that to dig up the information, to gather from other team, then you need enterprise architecture, because information currently is scattered, is in the island of many tiny island in the enterprise. And typically the information residing in the team or in the people. And this is not good for sustainability. That's why the enterprise architecture going to distill all the information, all the structure of the organization, so that we understand organization in the deeper meaning rather than what we know today. Even though you claim that, oh, I've been working in this company for 15 years, but well, 15 years, how many departments have you moved around, right? Yep. How about the previous 2 departments that you already, 2 years ago? Are they the same now? You can't answer me. So it's very difficult to transform. Yeah, that's why enterprise architecture, taking a very critical needs, no longer luxury, no longer optional, right? To survive, you need enterprise architecture. That's my thought after I've implemented quite a number of the project and I come across talking with people. That's my thought.
Absolutely. So we probably, do we have time for one more question, do you think, or how do you?
I think
we have time. There's one here, an anonymous attendee, so I'm not sure who, but if an organization has business areas of a mixture of asset management, unit trust, property and hospitality, what's the suitable framework or reference architecture for that organization while developing their digital transformation? I'll just give a quick answer and then I can pass to you, Aaron. So, so there's certainly the APQC out of America gives what's called a cross-industry reference model. So they kind of advocate that it's kind of generic. That's fine if you don't, if they don't, they have lots of industry specific ones too. So that's fine. You could potentially look to use that. But of course, I would normally recommend, if you're trying to engage with the business stakeholders, you need to be talking in a language that's familiar to them. So I would be looking to adopt several reference models, because the reference models should only be dealing with the business domain anyway, right? All the cross-industry functions like HR and finance and IT, they're common, right? And you could use any, like a cross-industry reference model for that. When you talk about the business verticals, you should have separate reference models for them, and they may have different meta models, and that's fine. You know, we can have a hybrid meta model where you can use, you know, BIAN for the finance bit. You could use, I don't know, for hospitality. Actually, I don't know if there is one, but there might be one in cross industry. But yeah, you can come up with different, you know, a service, you know, service industry one, have different ones, and that's fine. Like, why not have a mixture? You use the role-based access to only expose the bits to each different, you know, stakeholder. But again, don't boil the ocean. What you would do is you'd pick one of those business verticals that's most sympathetic and work with them first, and then, you know, build out a stack with them. And then, of course, when you come on to onboard another one, all you need to do is a different reference model at the top, but you've got all of the bottom bits right now. You know, strategy is going to be common, so the very top bit, and obviously all the technology is going to be a common way of thinking. Yeah, so you kind of top and tail it, but that business part, yeah, why don't use different ones? You know, that's all I'd say, Aaron.
Yeah, I think pretty similar concept. Basically, is the concept of I mean, like a typical enterprise ERP, right? ERP handling the warehouse, the finance, the sales, the marketing, the human resource, etc. Everything integrated. It's the same concept. So this is, I assume, is the conglomerate group. So they got the group of hospitality, the group of maybe oil and gas, the group of transportation, the group of maybe retail, and etc. Right? But typically the so-called the majority of stakeholders, they are sitting maybe in the headquarters or in the holding company. They want to know, they must have a common interest in every organization. Maybe they want to know the performance, the capability, and etc. So what happened, I think what we need to do is that we need to develop each of the vertical their own meta model, and on top of that there will be a so-called horizontal meta model that connect to each of the vertical.
Yeah,
it's the concept.
Yeah. As you say, finance is the common language of everyone. If the top layer is still numerical finance things, everyone's happy.
Yes. So the same concept also in our experience is that we have developed for the nation, right? I think I think the government of Malaysia. So the same thing that they have 25 ministry, and 25 ministry is all doing different things. It's like assuming 25 business unit, but in the one country, and they need to some sort develop a reference architecture so that they can see the impact. If any changes in the one ministry, what's the impact to other ministry? whereby each one of the ministry are quite independent to run their own so-called operation, their own transformation, their own capability, and etc. So it's the same concept. So of course, this is very, very common. The reality of EA is that it's not vertical, but some vertical, some horizontal, and you will cross a so-called a model, you will cross. So the ability of the impact analysis also can go beyond so-called from horizontal to the vertical. Likewise, from the vertical to horizontal and impact to the rest. So the key is that we need to define the meta model correctly. If we don't define the meta model relationship correctly, we can't get what we wanted to get from the so-called the EA2 or platform. That will be my answer.
No, excellent. So how's that? Shall we wrap up then? I mean, we're out of time, I guess. So yeah.
Last question. Let's do the last question.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Will the EA tool introduced to the organization will increase resource, or does that mean number of people? I'm not sure. Yeah. What is real? So, I mean, obviously, it makes any architect more efficient. So that's the first thing. So it doesn't do anyone out of a job. Like you'll never shrink the architecture office, but it'll make the capacity of each architect more, capable, right? They'll be able to, as Aaron was saying, they'll be able to answer questions very fast. And the last thing you want to have is the architecture office being the black hole where you throw these questions in and you have to wait a week to get an answer. So certainly you'll enable, it's like a calculator, right? You'll enable the architects to be more capable. Now, does that get the architecture office to have a better reputation within the business? Yes. So does that mean the business then starts to roll out more architects around the organization? Probably. So yeah, I mean, our experience tends to be, we talk about it as we have a whole, what we call customer success kind of, program. So yeah, we tend to make the architects like heroes. We make them famous within their company. And then once you start to be the go-to person, we talk about trusted advisor. Once you start to be, you get the respect and the trust, and businesses love it and they want more and more. So as much as you democratize it and you give the end users, control over their own information, it's the synthesis of all that information that the architects have that gives real value, and they seem to be very well sought after. So, yeah.
I think just to add, that typically in every organization, if you have already established the enterprise architecture as a culture, you're using a appropriate tool, actually you will discover more things that you never thought before. Okay, that's one thing for sure. And secondly, of course, I will ask you first if you're worried about if I introduce the tool, then my team going to shrink because my boss said we already invested in the tool, so I don't need a bunch of you. But of course, now the ratio. So typically, the healthy ratio between the numbers of architects against the entire IT strength, typically between 8 to 10%, right? So if you are not reaching that numbers, you don't need to worry, because what happened, you will need more architects. Even by putting the right tool, the right meta model, at the end you need to have a more, they call it a touch point. You need to cover a wider scope of enterprise. So typically you will, your ratio, the team full strength is between 8 to 10%. I give you an example of Bank of America. So Bank of America, about 50,000 staff, they got 6,000 full-time architects, 6,000 full-time enterprise architecture team. And one of the team is the members is Miriam, is one of the ISA members. So she said that, even the 6,000 of architects full-time in the bank are fully occupied, and they are handling between 3 to 5 projects at any point in time. It's scary, isn't it? So, we are still very far. Looking at what happened in the Asia Pacific, I think we are fall short. We got the very big IT team, like 1,000 plus. The architect is like only 10, 12. Still far. It's the time of the numbers of architects need to be jumped up like 10 times. Yeah. And of course now the issue is that many of architects is also they don't play their role effectively. There's also another issue that the management at the end said, I don't need this architect anymore, because they are too technical and they are too rigid. They make things hard. They become a stopper to many of the business improvement or capability, etc. Of course, now we have to get the right tool, the right platform. On the other hand, we also need to sharpen our competency, our deliverable, our delivery method, as well as how we can bring value to the business. That's, I think, the key message about architects. It's still in the high demand. I believe in Australia, so I think shortage, the whole world has shortage of architects, right? So, but we need to get ourselves ready to perform the right so-called role of architects.
No, great. Okay, well, with that, I guess, thank you, Aaron. Thank you. Yeah, that was excellent. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Again, after this COVID-19, I will see you face to face.
Yeah, exactly. When we can travel again. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I'll leave it with Aaron and his team to follow up with you guys. I mean, I think we'll send the slide decks out and a link to the recording and stuff like that. But no, it's great. So thank you.
Yep, I think the rest, I think we can just, there's an email. I think you can, the slide will be shared. Then after that, we can, keep in touch. Hope we can have another joint webinar or physical event in the coming months or years. All right. So with that, I think, keep everybody safe and healthy till we meet again.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.